Welcome to the Old Classic Car channel, and in this compilation we are looking at early motoring, the veteran cars, Edwardian cars, and into the early vintage years, so 1890s through to the beginning of the 1920s. And to begin with, we have this, a 1902 Panhard A Levasseur P396 is the registration. This car still shows up as being taxed and on the road and dates to 1902, so a nice early example, probably on one of the London to Brighton veteran car runs. Many of the photographs that feature in this compilation are from that event. And here we have three dapper gentlemen sat behind the wheel of an unidentified early vintage motor car. Several of the cars in this compilation I haven't been able to identify, so if you know what we're looking at here, please chip in and pop a note into the comments, because that would be really great. Okay, now we have LH4895. This is a Clement Bayard 12 horsepower car from about 1913, I believe. Now this registration number doesn't show up on DVLA, so I wonder where this car is now. Note the radiator behind the bonnet. And here is another example of a car that I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here, so again, if you know what this is, please let me know in the comments. All the cars that feature in this particular compilation are from the 1890s through to the early 1920s, and I'm guessing this is sort of late teens possibly, this particular car. Now we have a rear view here of what looks to be a bit of a restoration project. I can't quite make out what this is. It's got a transverse leaf rear spring, so perhaps could this be an early Ford, perhaps? I know that was a feature of many Fords for years and years and years. And there's an interesting van there in the undergrowth just to the left. Okay, we're definitely on the London to Brighton here. AH3, this is an 1895 Benz. This one is sawn and off the road at the moment, but hopefully we'll be back on the road very, very soon indeed. And what's that alongside it? That is an All Days registered AX 108. Okay, two photos now of a veteran car registered A504. This is another Panhard A Levasseur, circa 1902, and happily this one is taxed and ready to go. Look at the tax disc on the front there, January 1963, so it looks like a much earlier photograph, but we are just into the early 1960s with these two scenes. But what a great looking car that is. That huge central lamp on the front there, and you can see the very exposed radiator behind it. We've got detachable wheel rims, a big hooter there as well. Yeah, what a great looking car that is. The hood looks a little bit second hand though. And we're back to another vintage or veteran car event. In the foreground is a 1912 Lanchester. Helpfully there is an information plaque in the windscreen, and behind it F7353. That is a circa 1921 Unique. Of all things, Unique, a very common choice for taxi operators. Now, BE157 handily is identified as an 1895 Benz, one of the earliest veteran cars to feature in this particular upload. I wonder if this one's still around. Next up in this compilation, we have a side-on view of a magnificent motor car. Very much of the Edwardian era, I would suggest, but what car are we looking at here? It's got a very pronounced mascot on the radiator, or the filler cap on top of the radiator, and the chauffeur is behind the wheel, and everyone else are tucked up enjoying their drive. Now, H2079, that's an 1899 Decoville 517cc with a tiller steering arrangement, so there's lots of interesting details when you look closely at some of the cars that feature in this upload. Very much horseless carriages, many of them. Okay, now CE1726, that is a 1921 Rover, one of the newest cars to feature in this particular compilation. AJ583, alongside it is a 1913 Siddeley Deasley, the very distinctive radiator cowl arrangement on those cars. And here is a lovely vintage scene. I'm not quite sure what that car on the left is, so if you recognise that one, please pop a note into the comments, because it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that particular car. But what a lovely scene that is. A village scene, the church in the background, and probably the pub in the foreground. What a great looking picture that is. Okay, now we have D388. That is an 1899 Benz. And the vehicle registered P100. Alongside it is a 1902 Gillette Forest. It's a French car. These were built 1900 to 1907. Apologies for my pronunciation. There's a Moggy behind it. Now, A7312. According to a note on the back of this old photograph, we're looking at Uncle George and Ben in the Orleans at Burley Lodge. What an incredible looking car. Look at the headlamps on that particular car. What a great thing that is. Pioneer motoring in evidence there. Okay, probably in the 1950s now at a veteran car event. A633 is an 1899 Benz. Now this one shows up as being untaxed since 1985. So where is this now? Is it in a museum somewhere, tucked away in someone's garage perhaps? It's even been exported, who knows? And here's a lovely vintage scene here. We have N7005, and that car is a Manchester registered 1911, 1912 perhaps, Wolseley, the mighty Wolseley Tourer, in its motor house there. What a great scene that is. Unmade roads were very much the norm back in those days. And we are probably into the, 1950s here, judging by some of the cars parked up in the background. CE1229 is a 1903 Gladiator Tonneau. And happily, this car shows up as being taxed at the moment as well, so that's great, and hopefully it'll be out and about very, very soon. And there's a Morris Oxford demo in the background. Now look at this. What a magnificent looking car this is. This is a Rover, identifiable by shield shape radiator, but what a magnificent quality looking car that is. The fixtures and fittings are just stunning. What a beautiful car that is. Now we have BW398. This is a 1901 de Dion Bouton, as you can see by the information plaque on the front of the car there, and a very novel steering arrangement as well. No steering wheel on these cars, and again very much a horseless carriage, as these early motor cars were often referred to. A close-in view now of a 1908 Mercedes with a very early style AA badge just fitted to the bulkhead there, just behind a bonnet. So I'm guessing this is probably in the 1950s. Sadly, the registration number isn't visible on this particular car. Here's a nice little one, number 106 at this particular event, a 1903 Humberette. This would have been powered by a single-cylinder 5 horsepower rated engine, and yes, very cosy accommodation for a driver and passenger, but very little else really. It's a very small car indeed. And here we have a head-on view of AR872. Now, what are we looking at here? Is this a Renault? It's got the coal scuttle bonnet, which was very much a feature of early Renaults, so perhaps that's what we're looking at here. A couple of interesting vehicles just on the left in the distance as well, including a lovely old lorry, it would seem. Here's another early photo now, proper contemporary photograph, but what is it that we are looking at here? Again, the coal scuttle bonnet, so that narrows it down a little bit. Perhaps another Renault, who knows? Maybe if you do, let me know in the comments. Got a slightly soft tyre at the back there. And continuing this look at veteran cars and early vintage cars, we have a gathering of cars here, and many people well wrapped up for their trip. I'm assuming this is the London to Brighton, which usually takes place in November, and I can see some very thick coats there, so that would make quite a lot of sense. Next up, another really early motoring image. We've got a gentleman here stood in his motoring gown, alongside what car are we looking at there? Again, unmade roads. It was a very dusty activity being driven around in some of these cars back then, before tarmac became the norm. Another huge gathering of cars, large and small here. We've got a 4-car there of some description with a wicker seat, no less. So what a neat little car that is. But do you know what that is? Do you recognise it? Let me know again in the comments if you can help pin down identities on some of these cars. And next up, we'll probably had to have at least one Ford Model T in here somewhere. We've got a brass rad Model T here with a Hackney carriage label just on the front there below the windscreen. So clearly this is used as a taxi cab, and that is an Oxfordshire registration number on the front there. Back to the London to Brighton, and we have a 1904 Wolseley here, registered AH407. Another wonderful early motoring photograph here. I do love this sort of thing. H1388. Do you recognise what this car is? Quite square lines, very angular radiator on this particular car are quite well packed in, all those people in there, and I like the little wicker side panniers along the sides there. Okay, we're back to the 1950s and a bit of veteran car action. AB28. It's a 1904 Oldsmobile, a curved dash Oldsmobile. And again, this one shows us taxed and being ready for the road. I wonder if that's the case with the Morris Minor Tourer driving along behind it. AF387, another wonderful veteran photograph here. I do like that. What a great scene. This is about 1906, this, a Coventry Humber. That's a Cornwall registration that ran all the way from 1903 through to 1924. But yeah, you had to have some means behind you if you were going to run one of these cars back then. Okay, AD9 here. I think there are a couple of photographs of this car in this particular upload. A 1904 Mercedes Simplex, apparently. I had to look that one up. And that apparently is what we are looking at here. White being a colour for many Mercedes back in the very early days of the 20th century. And here's a jolly chap behind the tiller with a couple of ladies for company. But what is that we are looking at here? I have a feeling this could be, I'm not sure actually. I did have a few thoughts about this, but I'll leave it open to you guys. Let me know in the comments if you recognise what they are sat on there. And again, here's another one that probably needs a bit of identifying. There's a very distinctive radiator surround there. I'm guessing the photo probably dates to the 1950s. And the car is clearly about 1910 or roughly about that kind of era. So late Edwardian era car, but do you know what it is? Quite a gathering of people here on what must be a fairly chilly day. The car is a circa 1912 Siddeley Deasy. We saw one of these just a few moments ago. Again, that very distinctive coal scuttle type bonnet there with the radiator behind it, just ahead of the windscreen. So quite an interesting design feature on these cars. Next up, P534, seen powering past a pre-war Standard parked at the side of the road, but 534 is a 1903 Siddeley, circa around about 885cc, I think, the engine in that particular car. Okie dokie, now we are back in the 1950s clearly with the Vauxhall Victor in the background, but what on earth is that? Tiny wheels, tiny bodywork, very lofty roof, and a gent just about wedged inside it. But what an incredible looking car that is. But do you know what this is? Again, I don't really know my veterans too well. And how about this? What a great scene this is. I'm not quite sure what car we're looking at here, I'm afraid, but it's just a wonderful, wonderful image of early motoring in the 20th century. That is just an incredible looking car. Lots of luggage strapped to the running board as well. Okay, LKP1. A very early car here, possibly another Benz. Looking at that front suspension, looks very similar to some of the Benzes earlier on. Sadly, that registration number is now on a 2014 Nissan of all things. So where is this vehicle now? Why was it separated from its original registration number? Who would do such a thing? Okay, now handily, we're given a location of this as St Mawes Quay in Cornwall, and the 4-car is being shipped. 4-car is literally a little trike where the passenger seat is on the front, and this is clearly being loaded onto a fairly small vessel. But yeah, what a great scene. And there's a close-up of several gentlemen well wrapped up driving along in their magnificent Tourer, complete with rug on their knees, and who can blame them? But I wonder what car that is. Next up in this veteran vehicle compilation, we have another magnificent looking car of the Edwardian era, possibly a taxi judging by the rack on the roof, designed to take cases and such like. We've got the carriage type door handle on the rear there, and a very exposed seating position for the driver up front. And again, this is what looks to be a taxi of some description, and there's the driver complete with his furry gauntlets, so he's well prepared for anything that the weather can throw at him. But what car is that? Slightly more recent, probably in the 1950s here. I'm not quite sure what we're looking at here, but again, the gentlemen are dressed in very appropriate gear. No windscreen in this old girl. And I like the goggles as well, very Toad of Toad Hall. VC9393 now. heading a Austin 10. Now, what are we looking at here? This is a Star, the Wolverhampton-built Star from 1899. We've got quite a few interesting cars on the left-hand side there, but at the time they were just regular family saloons, 100E and another Ford Prefect alongside. Here's another beauty. This could be another Clement Bayard, perhaps, with the radiator behind the bonnet. But either way, what a wonderful scene of early motoring. I like the leather bag there strapped to the running board, so clearly there was a bit of a trip planned. There wasn't much in the way of accommodation for stuff in these early cars. Now, AHC9, that is a 1900 Peugeot, the French Peugeot. And again, there is that pre-war standard parked at the side of the road. Now, what is that? Possibly a standard Flying 10 in the background, and scooter. So I'm guessing late 50s or early 1960s. And next up, PBP 407. Apparently, according to a note on the back, this is an SB Electric of 1902, and motoring doesn't get much more basic than that. And there is nothing new in EVs, as this photo clearly demonstrates. Here's a lovely old image that's been converted into a postcard. Mrs. Athol Reader, the Copper Queen, and the world's premier businesswoman and her West car. What is the West car? Let me know if you know anything more about that particular gem, but what a great scene that is, and I love her attire. Okay, we're back to Brighton days, London to Brighton days. AP3575, a 1900 Napier 8-horse car, 2-cylinder and taxed and ready to go even now in 2024. So that's really, really good news, and there's a nice Vauxhall 12 behind it. Another wonderful scene here. Clearly someone had a little bit of money behind them. We've got a very, very early motor car park there just on the right hand side, and a magnificent looking house. What an interesting looking house that is. Very symmetrical indeed. A 9901 now. Now that registration resides on the 2022 BMW, so I'm a little bit of a loss as to explain why. But certainly an interesting looking car, probably late 50s here, and we've got a Borgward Isabella parked in the driveway just to the left there, and some lovely ornate gates as well. Now here's another one where you can't really see much of the car and identify it. Someone did suggest this might be a rebodied Ford Model T, so that's always a possibility, but these chaps look like they're ready to enjoy a fine day out, courtesy of their motor car. Fine pipes there as well. And here is another photo of AD9, this time moving along the early 1900s Mercedes. Carrying on this look at early veteran and vintage motor cars, we have a side-on view, a very, very faded side-on view of an unidentified motor car here. Two-seater car. Very, very comfortable looking seats though, but not much in the way of weather protection. Is there enough there to be able to identify this particular car? Shame the photo's a bit poor. And we're back to a huge gathering at an unidentified location, possibly again part of the London to Brighton, maybe in the 1950s, and a whole gaggle of motor cars there. AD 3553 is next, a 1913 Buick. Now this one shows as being untaxed since 2018, and again, like many of the cars, it has a lovely AA badge just below the windscreen there. Some magnificent lighting as well, and it looked to be in beautiful condition way back then. Hopefully it's still the case now. Okay, HNJ 999. This is an 1899 Benz dog cart. Now this one hasn't been on the road here in the UK since 2017, and it's shown as having been exported. So I wonder where this resides now. Look at the tiny, tiny front wheels on that. Okay, registered A6. This is a 1910 Renault, and the lady, apparently, a bit before my time, is Marion Ryan. Apparently she was a famous singer in the 1950s, and this photograph was taken at the Hilton Hotel in London. Quite what the event was, I do not know, it's not recorded, but yeah, that's all I know about that particular scene. And here's a lovely old colour postcard of a 6-horsepower Siddeley light car. And again, just a wonderful, wonderful image. Veteran cars don't feature too often here on the Old Classic Car channel, but in the name of variety, I wanted to include a look at many of these earlier type of cars. Okay, now what are we looking at here? This is a very, very basic looking motor car indeed. I can't quite make out all the registration. Is that QS or OS 8181? And it's got Don Quixote just in front of the front axle there. But what that is anyone's guess. But HOF 2 receiving a bit of human assistance here on a bit of a hill. It's a 1903 Argyle, all 267 cc's of it. So that is a proper early motor car. What a great scene that is. I hope it wasn't too heavy to push. And what a magnificent machine here. Probably late Edwardian or early teens, I would have thought this is. But do you recognise what this splendid motor car is? And there's an equally splendidly attired gentleman behind its steering wheel, ready to hit the road. Well, yeah, what a magnificent looking motor that is. Okay, we're back on, I think, the London to Brighton. We've got Y204, which is another example of the Wolverhampton-built Star, this one from 1901. It shows as being registered, but currently on sawn or off the road. But at least it still survives, which is the main thing. Again, super skinny tyres. And A1277 is a De Dion Bouton, and that is being hotly pursued by a modern MGTD, and equally modern Triumph TR2. Another early motoring scene here, possibly another example of a taxi or a hackney carriage. But what exactly are we looking at there? That shape of radiator certainly rings a bell. I was thinking Napier possibly, but I don't think that's what it is. Not much tread on those front tyres, sir, but a magnificent motoring overcoat. Okay, we're back in the 1950s here, and an unidentified veteran motor car here being admired by many members of the public. And there's a Forte's ice cream bar in the background there, perfect for a sunny day. And looking at the attire, this doesn't look like a November scene, which is usually the case for the London to Brighton. Okay, A3754 now. This is clearly a 1904 Wolseley. AR621 is next. That registration number is now, well, apparently it's on the 1932 Lanchester, but this car is clearly a 1903 Lanchester, so maybe there's a bit of a glitch in DVLA's records there. This is apparently a Lanchester 12 horsepower tonneau. And this here, this magnificent touring car, complete with chauffeur behind the wheel. This is a Wolseley of the early to mid-teens, I would have thought. Look at that beautiful buttoned seat upholstery in the front there. What a great looking car. That is the 3 ladies sat in the back ready for a nice day out. Okay, 053 is the registration number, and this is a Wolseley. This is registered as of 1928, but I think it's actually 1902 Wolseley. Quite a lofty driving position on this one, but at least you've got a windscreen. Now this is SCH Sammy Davis. He was a well-known motorcycle exponent, and I believe he wrote for Autocar magazine back in the day. This is his 1897 Bollé Tricar, now registered GJ458 apparently, but I can't see the number plate there. Now here we've got a series of photographs now. I think they're post-war photographs of an unidentified veteran car being restored and rebuilt. You can clearly see the chain drive to the rear axle, and there's quite a lot of detail in these images. It's well worth pausing the video at times just to have a proper look. And here is an underside side-on view of the same car. Again, you can see the wooden spoked wheels and a few clues as to the drivetrain. Quite a small engine up front and a very exposed radiator tube between the 2 chassis dumb irons at the front there. So yeah, quite a lot of detail. And there's a closer look at the engine. We'll see some more photographs of the engine outside of the chassis. But yeah, clearly a bit of a work in progress. I don't know what car this is, who took these photographs or when, but I'm guessing in the sort of late 40s or early 1950s the photographs were taken. But what car is it? It's certainly got a very vertically mounted steering column. You can see the various levers, and again a proper look at that chain drive rear axle. no brakes on the front. And yeah, is that a single or twin cylinder engine, I think, at the front there? But yeah, interesting project. I wonder if this one is still around. There's some closer looks at the engine. I'm sure veteran car enthusiasts will recognise what we're looking at here, so please pop a note into the comments. If you like this kind of thing, please have a look around the rest of the Old Classic Car channel, because there are loads of videos now featuring these early motoring images. Please like and give this one a subscription as well if you like this kind of thing. Next up, EOX1. We're back to roadworthy vehicles and 1902 Baker Electric, another early example of EV, electric vehicle. They didn't really catch on, and petrol cars became the norm very soon after. And here we have an American-built Chadwick. This is probably from the teens. Gas lamps on the front there, and being closely inspected by a gentleman from the Veteran Car Club. One of the scrutineers, according to his armband there. What a magnificent looking car that is. The engine looks huge. And here we have a side-on view of, now what are we looking at here? I think this is probably a de Dion Bouton, early 1900s example. And talking of de Dion Bouton, we have BLC 661 being hotly pursued by an early 1950s Humber. That particular car is a de Dion Bouton, also a 6-horse, 2-seater, and I believe this one is now registered Y333. Here's an interesting little one, photographed down at Brighton, I think, at the end of one of the London to Brighton runs. But what are we looking at here? A very interesting looking tricycle, engine mounted between the driver's knees. What a magnificent looking motor car. This is complete with Shell Motor Spirit 2-gallon can on the running board. This is a Moors Tourer, apparently. About 1911, 1912, somewhere around there. And there's another car just in front of the building, just visible behind that gatepost. Okay, another lofty job here. LC4407, a 1904 Cadillac. And behind that is another vehicle, registered ONK 115. And over to the right, the good old Ford Thames 400E minibus. Very, very neat. Now this is, and handily, this one is dated 15th of September 1923. Brandon, is that their name, or is that the location? But what car are we looking at here? Possibly another Clement Bayard, perhaps? The front end looks very similar there, with a radiator behind the bonnet, which was a feature, like I say, of several cars at the time. And we've got another general view of a London to Brighton here. A very unusual looking belt drive 3-wheeler on the left there, being hotly pursued by a Ford Consul Mark II. Again, an unidentified car, but probably late teens, I would have thought. Two very, very smartly dressed gents, complete with headgear, ready for a drive out in this open tourer. But what open tourer is it, I wonder? Here's a load of jolly people, and they're sat in a car called Emily, according to the little legend on the bonnet there. This is a 1906 Cadillac. Another beautiful scene here, and look at the note on there, off to the pole, East Dorset, January 26th, 1906. And yeah, what an interesting scene that is. A folding hood, but just for the people sat in the front. Very, very interesting indeed. And look at these two gents here again. There's a bit of a common theme with people being very well wrapped up indeed for all weathers. And like I say, London to Brighton run for veteran cars takes place in November. So I'm guessing that's the time of year of this particular shot. But what is the car, I wonder? Here's a magnificent motor car in a lovely setting. That's about 1911 or 1912, that car. It's a Crossley, the Manchester-built Crossley. And this was identified for me as probably a 15 horsepower Tourer. But what a great looking machine that is. MT906 now. This is one of the oldest cars to feature in this particular compilation, an 1896 Arnold dog cart. And, like the car we saw a few moments ago, also being pursued by a Ford Consul Mark II. At the time, just a regular, boring car. And here is a gent with his motor car in pieces. What a great scene that is. A few bits and pieces on the floor there, and he appears to be holding a couple of pistons in his hands. So yeah, he's a bit of work to do before that car gets back on the road. But can you see enough to identify this old light car? And this one is probably late 1950s, the date of this photo, but the car is much older, and handily is identified as a 1913 Wolseley AW1226, and this car also shows up as being registered and on the road ready for use even now in 2024. And we're back to Ford Model Ts again, and I recommend pausing this video. It's a wonderful photograph. Look at those white tyres outside the Belgrave Cycle and Motor Engineering Works. Motor cars on hire. Agent for Ford Motor Cars, agent for Sunbeam and Rally Cycles. And that magnificent Model T photograph rounds out this look at early cars, the veteran cars, the Edwardian cars, and the early vintage cars, mainly here in the UK. So, I hope that was of interest. Please pop a note into the comments, like, subscribe, all that kind of thing. Have a look around the rest of the channel if you're new to the channel or you haven't looked around for a little while. And there'll be many, many more videos along very, very soon. So, bye for now.